Hello, everybody. Welcome to the ultimate guide to report types. It's incredibly painful to stand and walk around. Normally, I'm running around the room when I do a presentation like this. I'm going to try to take it easy and stay in one piece. So we're all here to learn about reports and report types. And what I've discovered over the past couple of years is a new way to think about things I want to share with you all. So imagine a world where you only need one custom report type or object. If you're using a set of 3 objects in your org, you only need a custom report type for each object. If you're using 12, you would need 12. Think of all examples with a single object, but keeping that you build a deluxe report type and the object for. This idea came out of necessity. I was a young admin a few years ago, working the very first Salesforce administrative job. I was pummeled left and right. Here, do this. You fix this report anything I want. Can you add all these fields from this object to the report? I was jumping in there trying to figure it out, and the first
reports is this screen, right? You're choosing a report type. It's the very first thing you have to do before you start building your report. And if you type in a simple word like opportunities, you get dozens and dozens and dozens of choices here, right? Opportunities with this, opportunities without that, with or without. Just what do all those options mean, right? And you're getting pummeled with these requests from all of your users across your organization. And they want reports and they want them now. So at first, you know, you're learning and you're like, well, I don't know, I'll hope for the best. I'll choose something that has some of the right words that I wanted, right? So you choose a report type and you get started and you put in your filters and you get your grouping set up and you think you've got what you want, so you run it and show your users and they're immediately frustrated. You know, why is the same record showing up multiple times in these results? Or how can I include fields from X object? I'm not seeing it listed as an option for me. Or worse yet, I'm not seeing all of the records I wanted to see. Now, especially on this last point, I really want to hammer home why your report's not showing you the data you thought it would. There are 5 distinct reasons that I want to cover in great detail. Filters, 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 filters. The reason your data is not showing up in your report is because it's being filtered out. Now, there are 5 kinds of filters to be on the lookout for. You have your field filters, your time frame, who owns the record, role hierarchy could come into play. And the very first thing I have listed up there is report type. Did you know your report type can have filters embedded within it? And what's tricky about that is you can't change your report type when you're building your report. That's something you choose up front, and if you need to make a change to that, you have to start over and build a brand new report. Everything else is easy to make a change on the fly. You can add or adjust your field filters. So that gives you great flexibility. So what I really want to cover today is how to eliminate some of those filters that are in your report type and instead employ your flexible filters within your reports so that you have more flexibility to cover more different scenarios with a single report type, as I've alluded to. So in order to figure out how all of this worked, I started looking at, well, what does Salesforce encourage you to do when you're building your custom report type? What they encourage you to do is start with a primary object, like accounts, and then they want you to relate child objects to that, working your way down your data architecture hierarchy. What that means is you can only choose objects that are children of the original object you started with. So accounts can have many contacts, contacts can have many contracts, and contracts can have many opportunities. Now, when you go down this road, there's a 4-object limit when you're enforcing objects in your report type this way. And what are you really getting in these results? It's not really an accounts report type because the results you're seeing are not showing you account records, right? What you're actually seeing is a filtered list of records for whatever object is at the bottom of the hierarchy you've set up. Your report results are going to show you opportunities that are related to a contract, that are related to a contact, that are related to an account. If any one of those lookup fields is blank along that path, that row is filtered out. And the reason accounts is important here is it is the primary object you've chosen in your report type. Every record that shows up in your results must be able to relate back to an account record or it's not going to show up. So there's two concepts here. First is the primary object. You must always be able to have access to the primary object in your report type. And the second concept is you're always seeing a list of records for the object at the bottom of the hierarchy. The more objects you have enforced in your report type, the more filters you are applying to that data set. Blank looked out. Now this only handles a very specific reporting scenario. If you actually wanted to see all of the opportunity records in your org, this report type's not going to give that to you if any of those lookup fields are blank, right? And furthermore, it's kind of difficult using this method to bring in fields from another object. What if you wanted to reference something from the campaign, or maybe from the price book, or I want to know what team the contact creator was on, or who's the manager of the account owner? Those fields are not immediately accessible to you if you're just enforcing objects in your report type. So I discovered there's a better way to do this. Instead of starting at the top and working our way down our data architecture hierarchy, we can actually start at the bottom and climb up our data architecture hierarchy. One of the wonderful things about reporting in Salesforce is it relies on your structured data architecture, and you can use dot notation to bring in fields from parent objects, grandparent objects, great-grandparent, and you have a lot more flexibility if you do your reporting this way. So taking that same example and flipping it upside down, if we started with opportunities as the primary object in our report type, we can edit that custom report type layout and easily bring in all the fields from that same hierarchy from before. But in this case, it's way easier for us to grab those campaign fields, those price book fields, the contact creator, the account owner. Any lookup or master detail field that we can access from our primary object or any object above it in the data architecture hierarchy. You can see all these different paths we can take as long as we're working our way up our data architecture hierarchy, from the many side of the relationship to the one, from the child object to the parent object. You can traverse any relationship and pull in those fields, and you can use them as columns, you can use them as filters, you can use them in your grouping, and it gives you access to a plethora of data, not just 4 objects. You have access to up to 60 different objects using this mentality, and up to 1,000 fields can be in your custom report type layout. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you, for your reporting flexibility, the Swiss Army knife of reports, deluxe report types. The best news is these are so easy to create. It's just 3 simple steps. The first thing we're going to do is choose a primary object. This is the object where we want to have its records represented by rows in our report results. Step 2 is don't define any object relationships on this screen. All we want here is to have opportunities as our primary object, so we know we are getting every single opportunity record in our org, and we're going to get access to all the other fields we want in the third step, which is editing the layout to bring in fields from parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, you name it. So to show you just how easy that is, I'm going to switch into my Lightning-enabled org. Everything I'm showing you today works in Classic, it works in Lightning, it works no matter what edition of Salesforce you're on. There's nothing extra you need to purchase. If you have Salesforce, you can do this. So in the Setup menu, I go to Report Types. It's under Analytics and Reports and Dashboards. And I'm going to create a new custom report type. And just like our example, I'm going to choose Opportunities as our primary object. That's the object where I want to have its records represented by rows in our results. And I'm going to give it a name. Now, I like to name my report type the name of the object and then the word deluxe in parentheses. And that's going to help distinguish it from all the other report types that exist. And I'll show you a couple other things about that in a few slides. In the description, I list every row represents an opportunity record to make it very clear that's what you're getting in your results when you choose this report type. Then I list all of the other objects that I'm referencing in this report type, all of the parents fields I'm pulling in, grandparent fields, you name it. We're going to choose a category for that, and we want to make sure our report type is deployed. That way we can run reports using this report type. Step 2, this is honestly the hardest part. Resist the urge, okay? You're going to want to click this, and you're going to want to relate other objects, but don't do it. Just click Save when you get to this page. We just want opportunities enforced in this report type. So now this is step 3. It's down at the bottom here. Your report type is created at this point, and down at the bottom there's this section where you can edit the layout. And once you click on that, you get into this view here. Now by default, all of the fields from your primary object, in this case opportunities, are included in the report type layout. If you ever create a new field on your opportunity object, your primary object, it's going to show up in the panel over here on the right by scrolling through these buttons here. Just above that, there's this Add Fields Related Via Lookup, which should probably be about 100 times bigger, bright orange, and have fireworks, because that is where all the magic is happening here. If you click on that, you're going to see a list of all the lookup fields and master detail fields that exist on your primary object. So in this case, opportunities. So this is kind of the opposite paradigm from when we're on that page where you can enforce object relationships. You're starting at the top and it shows you all the child objects. This is starting at the bottom, starting on opportunities, and showing you all the different paths you can take from that object, working your way up. So if we wanted to pull in fields from the contract, like we were doing before, we can traverse that relationship. You can see in the path here, it tells you which object you're looking at now. And we can pull in any field we want from that contract record. So let's say I want the status, maybe the description, and I want to know when that contract started. We click OK, and any fields you're pulling in via a lookup relationship have the little magnifying glass icon next to it. That lets you know it's not from your primary object. We referenced that from some other object. Now, my pro tip number 1, anytime you are pulling in fields from another object, create a new section for that object. So I'm going to name this Contracts, and I can select all those fields from the contract object and drag them in. Cool, so let's do that again. Let's say I want to go, I'm starting on opportunity, I've navigated up to the contract object, but I want to know more information about the customer who signed that contract. So I can keep traversing lookup and master detail fields on any object that I get to in this view. So since this customer signed by is a lookup field to the contact object, I can traverse that relationship. Now I've gone 3 objects away. Let's say I want to know their full name, their mailing address, and their mobile phone number. Same idea, we're going to create a section for that, and we're going to drag those fields down into that section. So we'll keep doing the same thing. Go up to the contract, we're going to go up to the customer who signed it, and maybe I need to get some fields from the account related to that customer, and I might want to know some information about the account owner. Now look at this path here. I've started on opportunities, I've pulled in fields from contract, I've pulled in fields from a contact, I've pulled in fields from account, and I've pulled in fields from the account owner, a user object. That is 5 levels of objects, all in one report type. Something you can't do if you're just enforcing objects, working your way down the data architecture hierarchy. And again, I can pull in any field I want from here. Now some people say, oh, Evan, why don't you just click select all? What you'll find is there's a lot of fields on your objects that don't have any value in your organization. They're standard fields, there might be fields you're not using, or there might just be fields you don't need to report on, right? When's the last time you needed to report on SU access expiration date and SU org admin expiration date? I don't even know what that is, right? Those are standard fields on the user object that we've never needed to report on. So I would take this opportunity to tailor the experience and only include fields in your report type that are relevant in your organization, that provide value to your users. The other reason for that is if you keep clicking select all once you get to an object, you're going to blow through your 1,000 field limit in a hurry, right? So take the opportunity to only choose things that provide value, and you'll stay well within that 1,000 field limit for your custom report type. So we're going to pull in some of those fields. I'm going to call this account owners, and I'm going to organize them. Now, you can imagine how crazy this is going to get, and this is why I keep all my fields in sections, because you can keep going. I mean, you can start on any one of these objects and start traversing and look at the crazy spiderweb paths you can create, pulling in fields from every object along the way. Like I mentioned before, you can have up to 60 objects referenced in your custom report type and 1,000 fields. So it can be a lot to wrap your head around. But some of the interesting things you can do that might be plaguing you is like traverse a campaign hierarchy. Maybe you have a couple nested layers of campaign and you've never had a report type that could go grab something from the top level. Well, now you can do that. So once I get to this campaign object, I can view parent campaign and watch the path here to see where I'm going. I can go again, and I can go a third time. So this is the third level up in a campaign hierarchy that's related, what that opportunity is related to. Lots of possibilities here. Now, once you have all the fields you want and you have them organized in your layout, there's a couple other tricks you should know about on this page. If you double-click on any one of these fields, you have two options here. The first one is the display name. So by default, you get this like navigation breadcrumb trail of a name for the field, which is great if you want to know where it came from, but looks awful if you're grouping by that field in your report. So what you can do is you can shorten that up and maybe just call this is owner active, right? And this is not changing the label of the field. This is not changing the API name. This is just changing how this field displays in this custom report type. But it's an incredible way to personalize the experience for your users. Maybe there's a field that you don't really want to rename, but it would make more sense if it was called this in the report. This is the perfect way to do that, to make that clear for your users, especially when you're grouping by a field, or if you're doing some integrations call for having the column name is what you want to send to the user. You can just change the column name right here for that report type. The other thing you can do on this page is check this checked by default option, and that allows you to set up a template. Anytime a new report is created with this report type, the fields that are checked by default will automatically be included as columns. So that's another great way to jumpstart your users if they're just getting started with reporting. Go ahead and include some basic fields in the report type checked by default so that they start off with, oh, here's the contact name, here's when the contract starts, and some of that basic information. You can do that for a bunch of fields all at the same time. So let's say everything from the contact record is important. We can rename all those at the same time, and we can check them all off just by highlighting multiple fields and then double-clicking on one of them. And last but not least, there's a time frame filter on every report that chooses a date field or a date time field. And you'll notice, there's always a field that's set by default. Well, which one is that? That's going to be the first date or date time field present in your report type layout. So if you want to default the opportunity close date as that default field to be used for the time frame, just make sure close date is the first date field in your layout. And you can reorganize that to make sense. Cool, so we got this report type. We've got all the fields we want from all of our different objects. Now let's make sure we put that front and center for our users to use when they're building a report. Because up until this point, we still have this problem, right? Where we type in opportunities and we see way too many choices and don't know what half of them do. And in fact, your deluxe report type is going to be buried somewhere down at the bottom of this list because it has to be stored in another folder. And this is the only part where you need to switch into Classic in order to set it up. But once you do, you can switch back into Lightning and all of your settings would have taken effect. All right? So in Classic, on the report type selection page, at the very top, there's this select report types to hide checkbox with it's just on the report type selection page. It's not in the setup menu. It's one of those weird things. But as long as you have the permission to manage report types, you'll see that option there. And when you check it, all of the report types in your org, no matter if they're standard, they came with a managed package, you've built them and have no idea what they do, there's going to be an X or a check mark next to them. You can scroll through the list, and I would highly encourage just hide anything that's confusing, that you're not using, that you don't need for your organization. You can go through and whittle this list all the way down to just the standard report type for that object and your deluxe report type for that object. Now, the reason I like to keep the standard one that has nothing else enforced in it, that opportunities report type is going to have every field from the opportunity object, always. Even if you make 10 new ones today, they're automatically included, which is great if you're doing some quick development and just want to verify that your new field is working, or if your users want to see what are all my options on the opportunity object. That's fine. Your deluxe report type is going to be that tailored experience. It has all of the important fields that you need from your opportunity object, and you have the ability to pull in fields from your parents, grandparents, and onward throughout your data architecture hierarchy. Just between those two fields, those two report types, that's all you really need for any given object in order to do probably 90% of your report requests. There are some scenarios where you're going to want to enforce objects, and it's related to cross filters and some fancy ownership filters. And I don't have a lot of time to get into that with this presentation today, but if you want to know more about that, come talk to me afterwards and I can tell you about it. So we just want to simplify the menu so that our users see report types we want them to use. And given the choice, if you type in opportunities, if you could upgrade to deluxe for free, why wouldn't you do it, right? And frankly, if they use that deluxe report type every time, that's totally fine. Any report they would have built with the standard one can be done with the deluxe report type. So there's no harm in using deluxe all the time. So the last thing your users need to know is, what word do I type into this page so I get started with the right report type? And for that, I've been using this riddle. Every row represents a blank record. What you're trying to encourage here is for your users to choose the right primary object. What do you want to see a list of, right? They might come to you asking, how do I see the deals that closed last year? And from there, you just have to help them translate a little bit. Well, where do we store our deals in Salesforce? They'll say, oh yeah, well, I want to see a list of opportunity records. Every row would represent an opportunity record. They fill in that blank, they type in that word to the report type selection page, and they get two options. Do I want just fields from the opportunity record, or do I want fields from the opportunity and other objects related to it? They won't have to second guess themselves. You're going to know right from here what your results are going to be. You have the flexibility to add other fields to that report type at any point. And from there, you just use your field filters to create the different reporting scenarios you need. There's no more starting over after you've built all of your filters and groupings. You just choose the right report type from the beginning and get started on the right foot. So how does that sound as a better way to manage your reports in Salesforce? I have a couple resources here on your journey to success, and no journey would begin without Trailhead. So I've linked the reports and dashboards module up there. The second one here is a written blog post I did a few years ago called The Ultimate Guide to Report Types. I dive into a bunch of different scenarios that you can cover with your deluxe report type and using your field filters for that flexibility, as well as a couple of those niche scenarios where you do want to enforce an object in order to get a cross filter to work or some ownership filters. Everything I covered on that edit the custom report type page is covered in this hidden CRT functionality, which was written by Brent Downey, admin hero out of Atlanta, Georgia in the US. And then I have a quick video here on how to hide report types, if you wanted to look at that again. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here, and I'll take any questions.
I'm curious about the use case where you would have to use the filters, like what are
Yeah,
the details in that?
sure. So let's just do one.
Did you have an example for that report that you just created?
Yeah, I can do one of each. Let me start with that first, and then I'll jump into yours. So using our deluxe report type, so I have fields from my opportunity, and I've referenced the account name. And what's important to see here is I have access to all 5 opportunity objects in my org. Even though this Patty's deal is not related to an account, it's still included in the results. It just, there is no value for account name that I've referenced from the parent object. So you can take that same concept and apply it to any lookup field relationship you have in your org where you want to see all those records even though there's not a parent related. You just want to see a blank value. So some of the stuff I cover with like different scenarios is you can use field filters to create your different join relationships. So if you wanted to make sure, in a reporting case, only show me the opportunities related to an account, you can add a filter for account name to make sure it's not blank. And that filters out that Patty's deal, and we just have those 4 opportunities left over. Likewise, if we only want to see the ones that are blank, that don't have an account, we can say opportunity name is blank, and then we're only getting Patty's deal. Right? And then without that filter at all, we see all of the above. So that's 3 different join scenarios with using just a single report type. And then to answer your question about when would you want to enforce objects in your report type, that comes in when you're using cross filters. So cross filters allow you to filter based on data from a child object, right? Now your starting point on a cross filter can be any object that's enforced in your report type. So with this deluxe report type mentality, you're only going to have access to your primary object. But you might want to do something like, show me opportunities that are related to an account that have open cases, right? Opportunities and cases are sibling objects, both related to the same parent. If we used an accounts with opportunities report type, keep in mind, we're going to get only the opportunity records that are related to an account. But that's okay for this report scenario because we only want to see those that are for accounts that have open cases. So we can go over here and add our cross filter, and now accounts is an option for our starting point. And we can say only show me accounts with cases and add our criteria there for the cases. Closed equals false. So what this is giving me is a list of opportunity records related to an account, and those accounts all have open cases. And you didn't have to export to Excel, you didn't have to do any crazy joins. You just have to understand what results your report type is going to give you, and then use cross filters to do that additional criteria. Does that make sense?
Yep. Follow up, different question.
Sure.
Is there a way to get, when you create a new field, to have it added to report types?
Not automatically, but what I've been doing is, that's why I put all of that information in the description. You can set up a list view for your report types. And since you only have to manage one deluxe report type per object, you just set up a deluxe report type list view and include the description. And let's say I added a new field to the account object. If I just search for account, I can easily see which report types would make sense to put that new field. But it is a separate step at this point. I do believe they're working on the ability when you're creating a field to add them to report types. And this model would fit beautifully into that once that feature is available.
Because if you're doing multiple lookups, then you can't just go to that one deluxe report type. You have to go to the
You have to go to, yeah, right. That you would want to include it in. Any other questions, thoughts? Well, thanks so much. This has been great.